The notification sound on Maya Chen's phone cut through the silence of her cramped studio apartment like a knife. She was hunched over her laptop at 2:47 a.m., eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets for the past 6 hours, when the Instagram message popped up. Her heart sank as she read the sender's name, Veronica Sterling, her former college roommate and current social media influencer with 2.3 million followers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Hey Maya, saw your little Etsy shop. So cute that you're still doing your crafty thing. We're planning Jess's bachelorette in Tulum next month. The girls and I were wondering if you'd want to join. But honestly, your whole vibe is just so mid and embarrassing compared to where we all are now. Maybe it's better if you sit this one out? We wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable around our crowd. XOXO. Maya stared at the message until the words blurred together. Mid and embarrassing. The phrase echoed in her mind as she looked around her 400-square-foot apartment in Queens, with its peeling paint and the space heater that barely worked. Her crafty thing consisted of handmade jewelry that she sold online for barely enough to cover rent each month. At 28, while her college friends were posting from penthouse apartments and European vacations, Maya was clipping coupons and choosing between groceries and heating bills. She set the phone down with trembling hands and walked to the bathroom mirror. The reflection staring back at her showed tired eyes, hair pulled into a messy bun, and the same thrift store sweater she'd been wearing for 3 days straight. Mid and embarrassing. Maybe Veronica was right. Maya had never intended to become the friend everyone left behind. In college at Northwestern, she had been part of the core group: Maya, Veronica, Jessica, Amanda, and Chloe. They called themselves the Fierce Five, spending endless nights in their dorm rooms planning their futures, with the kind of confidence that only comes from being young and naive enough to believe the world owed you something. Back then, Maya was the one with the business ideas. She was studying marketing with a minor in art, constantly sketching designs for products, websites, and campaigns. Her friends would gather around her notebook, marveling at her creativity and vision. Maya's gonna be the next Steve Jobs, Veronica used to say, back when her Instagram had 200 followers instead of 2.3 million. But college dreams have a way of meeting reality with brutal efficiency. While her friends landed coveted internships at their parents', companies, or through family connections, Maya spent her summers working double shifts at a local coffee shop to pay for textbooks. While they networked at exclusive events, she was in the library until closing time, trying to maintain her GPA while working 30 hours a week. The divergence started small. A graduation party she couldn't afford to attend because she needed a cocktail dress and a gift. A group trip to Miami that cost more than her monthly income. Slowly, the invitations became less frequent, the group chats quieter when she was included, until she found herself on the outside looking in at a life that had once felt like hers. Veronica had parlayed her sociology degree into influencer stardom by posting lifestyle content that resonated with young women who wanted to live vicariously through someone else's designer wardrobe and international adventures. Her feed was a carefully curated fantasy of morning yoga sessions in Bali, champagne brunches in the Hamptons, and #BossLady motivational quotes, overlaid on photos of her MacBook next to fresh peonies. Jessica had married her college boyfriend, whose family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Midwest. Her Instagram was filled with photos of their sprawling suburban mansion, European honeymoon, and candid shots of her walking their golden retriever through perfectly manicured neighborhoods. Amanda had followed her passion for fashion by landing a job at a high-end PR firm in Manhattan, representing luxury brands and attending New York Fashion Week. Her stories were a constant stream of exclusive events, designer gifting, and behind-the-scenes glimpses of a world Maya could only dream about. Chloe had gone to law school and was now working at a prestigious firm in Chicago, making more in her first year than Maya had made in the past 3 combined. Her posts were fewer but more impactful. Photos from charity galas, exotic vacations, and professional headshots that screamed success. And then there was Maya, whose most recent Instagram post was a photo of a beaded bracelet she had made, captioned, "New design. Link in bio. With exactly 23 likes, most of them from her mother's friends. The message from Veronica wasn't the first time Maya had felt the sting of being left behind. But it was the first time someone had put words to what she suspected everyone was thinking. Mid and embarrassing. She had become the friend they kept around out of loyalty but no longer respected. The one they talked about in hushed tones when she wasn't around. Maya's jewelry business had started during her senior year of college as a way to make extra money. She had always been good with her hands, able to see beauty in small details that others overlooked. Her first pieces were simple. Wire-wrapped stones she found near Lake Michigan, strung on leather cord and sold at the campus farmers market. Students loved them because they were unique and affordable, and Maya loved making them because it was one of the few times her mind felt quiet and focused. After graduation, when her job applications were met with rejection after rejection, Maya had doubled down on the jewelry business. She created an Etsy shop, started an Instagram account, and spent every free moment perfecting her craft. But every free moment was limited when you were working 3 part-time jobs just to survive. She waitressed at a diner on weekends, worked as a virtual assistant for a small marketing firm during the week, and picked up shifts at a local boutique whenever they needed extra help. Between jobs, she would come home to her tiny apartment and work on jewelry by the light of her desk lamp, her fingers often cramping from the repetitive motions of twisting wire and threading beads. The financial reality was stark. On a good month, her Etsy shop brought in maybe $800. A bad month meant $200 or less. Her part-time jobs provided just enough to cover rent, utilities, and ramen noodles. But there was never enough left over for the kind of marketing budget that could take her business to the next level. She watched YouTube tutorials on growing an online business, read every free article about digital marketing she could find, and applied the strategies as best she could with her non-existent budget. Meanwhile, her college friends were living lives that seemed pulled from a magazine. Veronica had just signed a 6-figure brand partnership with a luxury skincare company. Jessica had posted photos from a wine-tasting tour through Tuscany. Amanda was attending Paris Fashion Week as a guest of Chanel. Chloe had been featured in her law firm's annual report as one of their rising stars. Maya tried to be happy for them. She really did. She liked their posts, commented with supportive messages, and pretended not to notice when they stopped responding to her messages or when group conversations died the moment she joined them. She told herself it was natural for people to grow apart, that success created its own social circles, that she shouldn't take it personally. But the Tulum message shattered those careful justifications. This wasn't about growing apart or busy schedules. This was about her friends actively excluding her because they were embarrassed by who she had become. Or rather, who she had failed to become. Maya spent the rest of that night scrolling through her friends' social media accounts, torturing herself with their perfect lives. Veronica's latest post showed her in a flowing white dress on a rooftop in Soho, arms raised toward.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The sunset with the caption, "Manifesting abundance and grateful for this view." Remember, you become what you believe you deserve. The post had 47,000 likes and hundreds of comments from followers gushing about her inspirational mindset. Jessica had shared a photo of her walk-in closet, organized by color and filled with designer pieces, captioned, "Spring cleaning means donating clothes I've only worn once to make room for new pieces. Grateful to give back." The comments were filled with heart-eye emojis and requests for her to do a closet tour. Amanda's story showed her at a private dinner, hosted by a luxury watch brand, seated at a table that probably cost more than Maya's monthly income, surrounded by fashion editors and celebrities Maya recognized from magazines. Chloe's most recent post was a professional photo of her outside the courthouse after winning a major case, captioned, "When preparation meets opportunity. Grateful for my team and clients who trust me with their most important moments." Each post felt like a reminder of how far Maya had fallen behind, how little she had to show for her years of struggle and sacrifice. While her friends were manifesting abundance and winning cases and attending exclusive events, Maya was Googling quote, to fix a broken space heater and calculating whether she could afford both groceries and laundry detergent this week. The worst part wasn't even the financial struggle. It was the isolation, the gradual realization that success in America wasn't just about what you achieved, but about who you became in the process. Maya had remained the same person she was in college, creative, hardworking, optimistic despite setbacks. But somewhere along the way, those qualities had stopped being enough. In a world where your worth was measured by your Instagram followers and your zip code, being kind and talented and persistent meant nothing if you couldn't also afford to play the game. She thought about her parents, who had immigrated from Taiwan when she was 5 years old. They had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they never had, working double shifts at their small restaurant in Chicago's Chinatown, saving every penny to send her to a good college. They still called her their successful daughter when she visited, proudly showing her jewelry to customers and telling anyone who would listen about Maya's college degree and her business. But Maya knew her success was an illusion built on their love and her own stubborn refusal to give up. She wasn't building toward anything meaningful. She was just surviving, month to month, paycheck to paycheck, order to order, and now her oldest friends had made it clear that they saw through the facade. The next morning, Maya woke up on her couch with her laptop still open and her phone dead. She had fallen asleep scrolling through business articles, looking for some magic formula that would transform her small jewelry business into something worthy of respect. The apartment was freezing because she had forgotten to turn on the space heater, and her neck ached from sleeping at an awkward angle. She made coffee with the last of her grounds and sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at the message from Veronica. In the harsh light of morning, the words looked even crueler. Your whole vibe is just so mid and embarrassing. We wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable around our crowd. Maya had spent years making excuses for her friends' behavior, telling herself they were just busy or that she was being too sensitive. But this message stripped away all pretense. They didn't see her as an equal anymore. They saw her as a charity case, someone to be pitied and managed rather than included and celebrated. She picked up her phone and started typing a response 3 different times, each message angrier than the last. But in the end, she deleted them all and simply wrote, "Thanks for being honest. Hope you all have a great trip." It was the last message she would ever send to Veronica Sterling. That afternoon, Maya did something she hadn't done in months. She called in sick to all 3 of her jobs and spent the day in bed, not because she was physically ill, but because something inside her had broken during those early morning hours, and she needed time to figure out what was left. She thought about quitting. Not just her jobs, but everything. The jewelry business that barely paid her bills. The social media accounts that reminded her daily of her failures. The entire exhausting cycle of trying and failing and trying again. Maybe her friends were right. Maybe she was embarrassing. Maybe it was time to accept that some people were meant for bigger things, and others were meant to fade into the background. But as the sun set outside her small window, casting long shadows across her cluttered apartment, Maya felt something else stirring beneath the hurt and humiliation. It wasn't hope, exactly, but it wasn't defeat either. It was anger. Clean, clarifying anger at a system that valued appearances over substance, at friends who had forgotten where they came from, at a world that measured worth in dollars and followers and zip codes. Maya Chen had spent 5 years being grateful for scraps, apologizing for her circumstances, and shrinking herself to make others comfortable. She had accepted being the friend who got invited last, included reluctantly, and dismissed casually. She had normalized being broke, being overlooked, being mid and embarrassing. But something about seeing those words in writing, about having her fears confirmed so bluntly, had shifted something fundamental inside her. Maybe it was time to stop apologizing for who she was and start becoming who she could be. She sat up in bed and opened her laptop. Instead of scrolling through her friends' perfect lives or reading articles about business strategies she couldn't afford to implement, she opened a blank document and started writing. Not a business plan or a marketing strategy, but a letter to herself. A list of every dream she had given up, every compromise she had made, every time she had chosen safety over possibility. The list was longer than she expected. Dreams of opening her own boutique, of creating a jewelry line that would be carried in high-end stores, of building something meaningful rather than just surviving. Goals she had abandoned because they seemed impossible, because she didn't have the right connections or the family money or the social media following that seemed necessary for success. But as she wrote, Maya began to see her situation differently. Yes, she was broke. Yes, she was isolated. Yes, her business was small and struggling. But she was also 28 years old, with a college degree, artistic talent, and 5 years of real-world business experience. She had kept her Etsy shop running while working 3 jobs, learned digital marketing through trial and error, and built a customer base that loved her work, even if it wasn't large enough to sustain her. Most importantly, she had nothing left to lose. Her friends had already written her off. Her financial situation couldn't get much worse. Her social status was already at rock bottom. For the first time in years, Maya felt the strange freedom that comes from hitting the absolute floor. The only direction left was up. She closed her laptop and walked to the corner of her apartment where she kept her jewelry supplies. Boxes of beads and wire, tools she had collected over the years. Half-finished pieces that represented hours of work and hope. This corner had been her sanctuary and her prison, the place where she created beauty and counted pennies in equal measure. Maya picked up a necklace she had been working on for weeks, a complex piece with hand-wrapped stones and intricate beadwork that had taken her nearly 20 hours to complete. On Etsy, she could sell it for maybe $150, which worked out to less than minimum wage when she factored in materials and time. But the craftsmanship was exquisite, the design unique, the quality undeniable. For the first time, Maya began to wonder if the problem wasn't her work or her talent, but her market. She had been trying to compete in a race where the rules were rigged against her, selling handmade jewelry to college students and young professionals who wanted designer quality at thrift store prices. Maybe it was time to change the game entirely. She set the necklace down and picked up her phone, scrolling through the Instagram accounts of luxury jewelry brands. Van Cleef & Arpels, Tiffany & Company, David Yurman. Their pieces sold for thousands of dollars, marketed to women who thought nothing of spending Maya's monthly income on a single bracelet. The craftsmanship wasn't necessarily better than hers, but the presentation, the story, the brand positioning were in a completely different league. Maya had spent years accepting that luxury was for other people, that her background and bank account disqualified her from playing in that space. But what if she was wrong? What if the only thing standing between her and success wasn't talent or quality, but mindset and strategy? She thought about Veronica's message again, but this time the anger felt productive rather than destructive. Mid and embarrassing. Your whole vibe. Maybe it was time to completely reinvent her vibe. Maybe it was time to stop apologizing for who she was and start becoming someone entirely new. Maya Chen had spent 5 years trying to build a sustainable small business. But maybe what the world needed wasn't another small business. Maybe what it needed was something bigger, bolder, and unapologetically ambitious. Something that would make her former friends remember her name for all the right reasons. The girl who had once dreamed of being the next Steve Jobs was still in there somewhere, buried under years of rejection and financial stress and social humiliation. But rejection had taught her resilience, financial stress had taught her resourcefulness, and social humiliation had finally taught her that she had nothing left to lose. Maya walked to her bathroom mirror and looked at her reflection again. Same tired eyes, same messy hair, same thrift store sweater, but something behind her eyes had changed. The defeat was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. Determination with nothing left to lose. Mid and embarrassing, she said to her reflection, "We'll see about that." She didn't know exactly what she was going to do yet, but she knew who she was going to become. Not the grateful, apologetic version of herself who accepted scraps and made excuses. Not the friend who shrunk herself to make others comfortable. Not the small business owner who counted pennies and accepted limitations. Maya Chen was about to become someone entirely new. Someone who didn't just survive in a world that had written her off, but thrived in spite of it. Someone who would turn mid and embarrassing into a billion-dollar empire. The transformation wouldn't happen overnight. But it started that night, in a 400-square-foot apartment in Queens, with a woman who had finally gotten angry enough to stop accepting the world as it was and start creating the world as it should be. Because sometimes the biggest successes come from the smallest beginnings, and sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming everything they said you never could be. The first thing Maya did was quit 2 of her 3 jobs. Not because she had a plan, but because she realized that working 60 hours a week just to survive was preventing her from working on the one thing that could actually change her life. She kept her weekend shifts at the diner because tips were immediate and cash, but she walked away from the virtual assistant position and the boutique job without looking back. Her bank account, already anemic, looked even more pathetic after losing 2 income streams. But for the first time in years, Maya had something more valuable than money: time. 40 hours a week of time that she could pour into rebuilding herself and her business from the ground up. She started with research. Not the kind of surface-level Googling she had done before, but deep, methodical investigation into how luxury brands actually operated. Maya spent hours in the public library since her apartment's internet was spotty and she couldn't afford to upgrade, poring over business journals, fashion magazines, and case studies of companies that had gone from nothing to everything. What she discovered challenged every assumption she had made about her industry. The jewelry market wasn't just about craftsmanship or even beauty. It was about story, status, and scarcity. Tiffany & Company didn't charge $3,000 for a silver bracelet because the materials were expensive. They charged $3,000 because they had convinced the world that owning their bracelet meant something about who you were as a person. Maya realized she had been approaching business like an artist when she needed to think like a psychologist. People didn't buy jewelry. They bought the feeling of being the kind of person who could afford that jewelry. They bought the story they could tell themselves and others about their success, their taste, their worth. This revelation was both crushing and liberating. Crushing because it meant that all her focus on perfecting her craft had been missing the point. Liberating because it meant the game had rules she could learn and master, even without money or connections. She started studying her former friends' social media accounts, not with envy but with the analytical eye of a strategist. What stories were they telling? What feelings were they selling? How did they position themselves as aspirational figures worthy of follows, likes, and ultimately purchasing power? Veronica had built her empire on selling the fantasy of effortless sophistication. Her posts never showed her working or struggling. Instead, they portrayed a life of seamless beauty, where success appeared to flow naturally from good vibes and positive thinking. She had turned herself into a brand that represented what her followers wanted to become. Jessica sold domestic perfection, the dream of a life where love and money intersected beautifully. Her content suggested that with the right partner and the right mindset, anyone could live in a mansion with a golden retriever and fresh flowers in every room. Amanda represented creative success, the idea that following your passion could lead to glamorous career opportunities and global adventures. Her posts implied that with enough ambition and the right aesthetic, work could feel like play. Chloe embodied professional power, showing that smart women could command respect and financial success in traditionally male-dominated fields. Her content suggested that with enough education and determination, anyone could break through glass ceilings. Each of them had identified a specific aspiration and built their entire personal brand around representing that possibility. They weren't just living their lives, they were curating experiences that others wanted to purchase or participate in. Maya began to see her own situation differently. Instead of being the friend left behind, she was the underdog with the most compelling potential story. Everyone loved a comeback narrative, especially one that started from rock bottom. While her friends had built their brands on privilege and existing advantages, Maya could build hers on transformation and triumph over adversity. She started documenting her journey, but not in the way she had before. Instead of posting desperate updates about her jewelry sales or apologetic explanations for her circumstances, Maya began crafting content that positioned her struggle as the first chapter of an epic success story. Her first post was a photo of her hands, stained with metal polish and covered in small cuts from jewelry making, with the caption, "Every master craftsperson has hands that tell stories." These hands have made over 500 pieces of jewelry, worked 60-hour weeks, and refused to quit when everyone said I should. They're about to build something extraordinary. The post got more engagement than anything she had shared in months. People responded to authenticity, especially when it was packaged with confidence and forward momentum. Maya began to understand that her struggle wasn't something to hide or apologize for. It was her greatest marketing asset. She started researching successful entrepreneurs who had built luxury brands from nothing. She studied Sofia Amoruso, who had turned a vintage clothing eBay store into a multi-million-dollar fashion empire. She read about Sarah Blakely, who had cut the feet-off pantyhose in her apartment and turned that idea into Spanx. She studied Rihanna's Fenty Beauty launch, which had disrupted the entire cosmetics industry by serving customers that established brands had ignored. What all these women had in common wasn't access to capital or industry connections. They had all identified gaps in their markets and filled them with products that told better stories than what was currently available. They had all positioned themselves not as small business owners, but as industry disruptors who were changing the rules of the game. Maya began to see jewelry differently. The market was dominated by heritage brands that sold tradition and newcomers that competed on price. But there was space for something else, a brand that represented self-made success, that told the story of building something beautiful from nothing, that spoke to women who were creating their own version of luxury rather than inheriting it. She started sketching designs that reflected this philosophy. Instead of delicate, apologetic pieces that whispered their presence, Maya began creating bold, architectural jewelry that commanded attention. Pieces that looked expensive even when they weren't, that suggested strength and ambition rather than fragility and tradition. The first piece in her new collection was a statement necklace that incorporated rough, unpolished stones with sleek metal elements. It looked like something that belonged in a contemporary art museum, edgy and sophisticated in a way that felt completely fresh. Maya named it Foundation because it represented building something solid from raw materials. But creating beautiful jewelry was only half the equation. Maya knew she needed to completely reimagine how she presented herself and her work. She couldn't afford professional photography or a fancy website, but she could learn to do both herself. She spent days watching YouTube tutorials on product photography, learning how to use natural light and simple backgrounds to make her pieces look editorial quality. She rearranged her entire apartment to create a photography corner where she could shoot consistent, professional-looking images. Maya also began studying luxury brand websites and social media accounts, analyzing everything from color palettes to vocabulary choices. She noticed that luxury brands never apologized for their prices or explained their value propositions. They simply presented their products as obviously superior and let customers draw their own conclusions. She started writing product descriptions that sounded like they belonged on the pages of Vogue rather than Etsy. Instead of handmade beaded necklace perfect for casual wear, her descriptions read like architectural statement piece featuring hand-selected stones in oxidized silver setting. For the woman who builds her own empire. The transformation extended beyond her products to her entire online presence. Maya created a new Instagram account with a cohesive aesthetic that looked nothing like her previous scattered, apologetic posts. Every image was carefully curated to tell the story of a brand that was confident, ambitious, and unapologetically luxury. She researched hashtag strategies used by successful luxury brands and began using tags that positioned her jewelry alongside high-end designers rather than handmade crafts. Instead of hashtag handmade jewelry and hashtag Etsy finds, she used hashtag statement jewelry, hashtag luxury accessories, and hashtag investment pieces. Maya also began reaching out to fashion bloggers and micro-influencers who represented her target demographic, ambitious women in their 20s and 30s who were building their careers and wanted jewelry that reflected their aspirations rather than their current budget limitations. She didn't have money to pay for influencer partnerships, but she offered to create custom pieces for women whose aesthetic aligned with her brand vision. These collaborations gave her content for her social media accounts and introduced her jewelry to new audiences who valued quality and uniqueness over mass-market accessibility. The response was immediate and dramatic. Within a month of launching her rebrand, Maya's Instagram followers had tripled. More importantly, the engagement was completely different. Instead of pity likes from friends and family, she was getting comments from strangers asking about pricing and availability. Her Etsy sales began climbing not just in volume, but in price point. The same customers who had balked at paying $50 for her previous designs were happily spending $200 on pieces from her new collection. Maya realized that by positioning her jewelry as luxury rather than handmade crafts, she had given customers permission to value her work appropriately. But the real breakthrough came when a fashion blogger with 50,000 followers posted a photo wearing Maya's foundation necklace. The image went viral within hours, generating hundreds of comments and direct messages asking where to buy the piece. Maya watched her phone buzz continuously as orders poured in. In one day, she made more money than she had in the previous 3 months combined. But more than the financial success, the response validated everything she had been learning about branding and positioning. She was no longer competing in the handmade jewelry market against thousands of other crafters selling similar pieces for similar prices. She had created her own category, luxury jewelry for self-made women, pieces that told stories of ambition and achievement rather than tradition and inheritance. The viral moment taught Maya something crucial about modern business. In a world where attention was the most valuable currency, being remarkable was more important than being perfect. Her jewelry wasn't necessarily better than what established luxury brands offered, but it represented something different, something that resonated with women who saw themselves in Maya's story. She began to understand that her background, which she had always seen as a disadvantage, was actually her greatest competitive advantage. While heritage brands sold history and established designers sold pedigree, Maya could sell transformation. She could represent the possibility that anyone could build something beautiful and valuable from nothing. This realization shifted Maya's entire relationship with her past struggles. Instead of being ashamed of her financial limitations or embarrassed by her outsider status, she began to see these experiences as the foundation of her brand authenticity. Every rejection, every month of choosing between groceries and heating bills, every moment of being excluded from her friends' privileged world had given her something that money couldn't buy, a genuine understanding of what it meant to fight for every opportunity. Maya started sharing more of her story, but strategically and purposefully. She posted about working 3 jobs while building her business, about learning photography from YouTube tutorials, about creating her first workshop space in a corner of her studio apartment. But she framed these experiences not as hardships to be pitied, but as evidence of her determination and resourcefulness. The response was overwhelming. Women began sharing their own stories in the comments, talking about their side hustles and their dreams and their struggles to build something meaningful in a world that seemed designed to keep them small. Maya's jewelry became more than accessories. It became symbols of a movement. She realized she had stumbled onto something much bigger than a jewelry business. She had created a brand that represented a specific mindset, the belief that you could build your own version of luxury, that success didn't have to be inherited or handed down, that beautiful things could emerge from difficult circumstances. Maya began expanding her vision beyond individual pieces to entire collections that told cohesive stories. She launched a line called Self-Made that featured bold, geometric designs in mixed metals, pieces that looked both artistic and powerful. Each piece came with a card that told the story of its inspiration, connecting the physical jewelry to the emotional journey of building something from nothing. She also started building relationships with her customers that went beyond transactions. Maya began sending handwritten thank you notes with every order, sharing behind-the-scenes content from her workshop, and creating a private Facebook group where customers could share their own entrepreneurial journeys. The community that grew around her brand became as valuable as the products themselves. Women used the Facebook group to network, to share business advice, to celebrate each other's wins. Maya had accidentally created what every brand dreams of, a tribe of loyal customers who saw purchasing her jewelry as a way of supporting a larger mission. As her success grew, Maya found herself thinking less about her former friends and more about the community she was building. She realized that she had been seeking validation from people who represented values she didn't actually share. Veronica's success was built on selling fantasies to people who couldn't afford to live them. Jessica's content promoted a version of happiness that required a wealthy husband and inherited advantages. Amanda and Chloe had leveraged family connections and elite educations to access opportunities that weren't available to most people. But Maya was building something different. Her success was proof that intelligence, creativity, and persistence could overcome disadvantages. Her customers weren't buying into a fantasy. They were investing in their own potential for transformation. The financial results were undeniable. Within 6 months of her rebrand, Maya was making more from her jewelry business than she had from all 3 of her previous jobs combined. She was able to move out of her studio apartment in Queens and into a 1-bedroom in Brooklyn with dedicated space for her workshop. More importantly, she was building something sustainable and scalable. Instead of trading time for money like she had with her previous approach, Maya was creating systems and processes that could grow without requiring her to work more hours. She hired a part-time assistant to help with order fulfillment and customer service, freeing up her time to focus on design and brand development. Maya also began attracting attention from retailers and wholesale buyers. A boutique in Soho reached out about carrying her pieces, followed by inquiries from stores in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami. Instead of selling individual pieces online, she could now sell entire collections to retailers who would market her jewelry to their established customer bases. The girl who had once been grateful for $200 Etsy sales was now negotiating wholesale orders worth thousands of dollars. Maya realized that her success wasn't just about working harder or being more talented than her competition. It was about understanding that business was psychology, that success was as much about perception as it was about product quality. She had learned to think like her customers, to understand what they wanted to believe about themselves and their potential. Maya's jewelry didn't just make women look good. It made them feel like the kind of women who deserved beautiful things, who had the confidence to invest in themselves, who were building lives worthy of envy rather than pity. The transformation was complete in every way except one. Maya still carried the anger that had started her journey. Not bitter, destructive anger, but focused, productive fury at a world that had tried to convince her she should be grateful for scraps. That anger had become fuel, driving her to prove wrong everyone who had written her off. And she was just getting started. The jewelry business was successful, but Maya's vision had grown beyond individual pieces or even entire collections. She was beginning to see possibilities for something much larger, an empire built on the belief that luxury should be earned, not inherited, and that the most beautiful things emerged from the hardest struggles. Maya Chen was no longer the friend left behind or the entrepreneur scraping by. She was becoming someone entirely new, a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had turned mid and embarrassing into the foundation of something extraordinary. And the best part was that her former friends had no idea what was coming. Maya's breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in November, 18 months after Veronica's message had shattered her world. She was sitting in her new Brooklyn workshop, a converted warehouse space she now shared with 3 other artists, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end belonged to Patricia Holbrook, senior buyer for Bergdorf Goodman. "Ms. Chen, I've been following your work through our trend forecasters, and I'd like to discuss carrying your collection in our contemporary jewelry department. When would be convenient for you to visit our offices?" Maya stared at the phone for a full 10 seconds after Patricia hung up. Bergdorf Goodman wasn't just any retailer. It was the ultimate symbol of luxury retail in New York, the store where Manhattan's elite shopped for items that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Being carried at Bergdorf would legitimize her brand in ways that no amount of social media success could match. The meeting took place the following week in Patricia's office, overlooking Fifth Avenue. Maya wore a black blazer she had found at a consignment shop and styled it with 3 pieces from her latest collection: a geometric cuff bracelet, architectural earrings, and her signature foundation necklace. She looked like she belonged in that glass-walled office, even though her heart was racing. Patricia examined each piece Maya had brought with the careful attention of someone who evaluated luxury goods for a living. She held them up to the light, tested the weight and balance, ran her fingers over the metalwork with practiced expertise. "The craftsmanship is exceptional," Patricia said finally. "But what really interests me is the story behind the brand. Our customers aren't just buying jewelry. They're buying into a narrative about who they are and who they want to become. Your pieces speak to women who are building something, not inheriting it." They discussed pricing, delivery schedules, and marketing support. Maya fought to keep her voice steady as they talked about order quantities that represented more money than she had made in her entire life up to that point. When Patricia mentioned that Bergdorf would want to launch Maya's collection with a trunk show featuring her newest pieces, Maya nodded professionally while internally calculating how much this single opportunity would change everything. The Bergdorf launch was scheduled for the following spring, which gave Maya 6 months to prepare the most important collection of her career. She used the advance payment from the wholesale order to invest in better materials, more sophisticated tools, and her first real marketing campaign. Maya hired a photographer who had worked with major fashion brands, upgraded her website to something that looked as polished as any established luxury label, and began working with a PR firm that specialized in launching emerging designers. Every decision was calculated to position her brand not as a newcomer trying to break into the luxury market, but as an established player that sophisticated consumers were just discovering. The trunk show at Bergdorf Goodman took place on a Thursday evening in April. Maya had designed the event to feel more like an art gallery opening than a traditional retail presentation. Each piece was displayed on custom stands that highlighted the architectural elements of her designs, and she had commissioned a series of photographs that showed her jewelry being worn by women in powerful positions: a surgeon, a tech CEO, a federal judge, an investigative journalist. The guest list included fashion editors, influential customers, and industry insiders who could amplify the reach of the launch. Maya had learned enough about luxury marketing to understand that the right people wearing her jewelry once was worth more than thousands of traditional advertisements. She wore a custom piece she had created specifically for the event, a dramatic collar necklace in blackened silver with geometric cutouts that created shadows and light as she moved. The piece was bold enough to photograph beautifully, but sophisticated enough to signal that she understood luxury aesthetics. The response exceeded every expectation Maya had allowed herself to have. By the end of the evening, she had sold nearly every piece in the collection, taken custom orders worth 6 figures, and been approached by buyers from 3 other major department stores. Fashion bloggers were already posting photos from the event, and Maya's Instagram notifications were flooding with new followers and collaboration requests. But the moment that mattered most came near the end of the evening, when Maya was speaking with a journalist from Vogue about her background and design philosophy. A familiar voice interrupted their conversation. "Maya? Oh my God, I can't believe it's you!" Maya turned to see Jessica standing behind her, perfectly styled in designer everything, looking exactly like the version of success Maya had once envied. Behind Jessica stood Amanda and Chloe, their expressions a mixture of shock and something that looked suspiciously like panic. "We saw the article about your trunk show in the Times," Jessica continued, her voice artificially bright. "We had no idea you were doing so well. This is incredible." Maya smiled politely and introduced her former friends to the Vogue journalist, who immediately perked up with interest. A story about childhood friends unexpectedly reuniting at a major fashion launch was exactly the kind of human interest angle that magazines loved. "How long have you known Maya?" the journalist asked, pulling out her phone to record their conversation. "We were roommates in college," Amanda jumped in. "Maya was always so creative. We knew she'd do something amazing eventually." Maya felt a familiar surge of anger at the casual rewriting of history, but she channeled it into something more productive. "Actually," she said smoothly, "these 3 were hugely instrumental in my success. They taught me some valuable lessons about authenticity and staying true to your values even when it's difficult." The journalist's eyes lit up. This was getting even better. "What kind of lessons?" she asked. Maya looked directly at Veronica, who had been silent since arriving. "Well, they showed me the difference between building something real versus building something that just looks good on social media. I learned that sustainable success comes from serving customers who genuinely value what you're creating, not from chasing metrics that make you feel important but don't actually build wealth." Jessica's smile faltered slightly. "Oh well, we all take different paths to success, don't we?" Absolutely, Maya agreed. I think the key is understanding what success actually means. For me, it's been about building something that creates value for other people while generating real wealth and independence. I've never been interested in looking successful if it wasn't backed up by actual financial results. The journalist was taking notes furiously. Maya could see her former friends exchanging glances, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but unable to leave without seeming rude. That's such an interesting perspective, the journalist said. How do you define real wealth versus the appearance of success? Maya had been waiting for this question her entire adult life. Real wealth means owning assets that generate income without requiring your constant time and energy. It means having enough financial security to make choices based on your values rather than your bills. It means building something that could continue to grow and create value, even if you stepped away from day-to-day operations. She gestured around the gallery space filled with well-dressed customers. Examining her jewelry, tonight represents about 6 months of revenue for my company, but the real value is in the relationships I'm building with retailers and customers who will support my work for years to come. I'm building equity in something that belongs to me completely. The subtext was clear to everyone listening. While her friends had built their brands on rented platforms and borrowed credibility, Maya had created something that belonged entirely to her. Her success wasn't dependent on maintaining an image or keeping up with algorithmic changes or hoping that other people's companies would continue to provide opportunities. She had built actual wealth, not just the appearance of it. That's so inspiring, Chloe said, but her voice sounded strained. We should definitely catch up properly soon. Maybe we could all get dinner? Maya smiled genuinely for the first time since they had arrived. I'd love that. Though I should mention, I'll be pretty busy for the next few months. We're opening our first flagship store in Soho this summer, and I'm launching a collection with a major European retailer in the fall. Plus, there's the documentary that's being filmed about the company's growth. She wasn't bragging. Every word was true, the result of 18 months of relentless focus and strategic thinking. But Maya could see the impact her words were having on her former friends, who had clearly expected to find her still struggling and grateful for their attention. A documentary? Amanda asked weakly. Netflix picked up a series about entrepreneurs who built luxury brands from nothing, Maya explained. They're following 5 different companies through our growth phases. It should be fascinating to see how different people approach scaling creative businesses. The journalist was practically vibrating with excitement. This was turning into a much bigger story than anyone had expected. Would you be willing to do a longer interview about your journey? She asked Maya. Our readers would love to hear about how you built this company. And perhaps your friends could share their perspectives on watching someone they knew in college become such a major success. Maya glanced at her former friends, who looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. She felt a moment of genuine pity for them, remembering how desperately she had once wanted their approval and inclusion. Of course, she said to the journalist. Though I think what would be really interesting is exploring how different people define success and fulfillment. These 3 have all built impressive careers and social media presences. It would be fascinating to compare different approaches to professional achievement. The journalist nodded enthusiastically, already planning her article. Maya exchanged contact information with her and promised to set up a formal interview session. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Maya's former friends lingered awkwardly near the entrance. Finally, Veronica approached her alone. Maya, I owe you an apology, she said quietly. That message I sent about Tulum was cruel and unnecessary. I was in a weird place, and I took it out on you. Maya studied Veronica's face, looking for genuine remorse beneath the carefully applied makeup and strategic vulnerability. What she saw was more complex than simple regret. Veronica looked tired, in a way that no amount of skincare or lifestyle optimization could fix. Her success was real but exhausting, requiring constant content creation and performance of a life that was more curated than lived. I appreciate that, Maya said. But honestly, that message was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It forced me to stop making excuses and start building something real. Veronica blinked in surprise. Really? Really? I was so focused on trying to fit into other people's version of success that I wasn't building my own. Your message made me realize I needed to stop seeking approval from people whose values I didn't actually share. The words hung in the air between them, honest, but not cruel. Maya wasn't trying to hurt Veronica, but she wasn't going to pretend that their friendship could simply resume as if nothing had happened. "I'd love to hear more about your business," Veronica said, her influencer instincts kicking in. "Maybe we could collaborate on some content. My audience would love to discover your jewelry." Maya smiled politely. "That's kind of you to offer, but my marketing strategy is pretty specific to my target demographic. I work with influencers whose audiences are actively building wealth and investing in high-quality pieces rather than following trends." It was a diplomatic way of saying that Veronica's followers weren't Maya's customers. But the message was clear. Maya no longer needed Veronica's platform or approval. If anything, associating with lifestyle influencers would dilute the luxury positioning she had worked so hard to establish. Over the following weeks, Maya watched with interest as her former friends tried to insert themselves into her success story. Jessica posted about supporting small businesses, though she didn't tag Maya's company or actually purchase anything. Amanda shared an Instagram story about college friendships, featuring an old photo of their group with Maya prominently included, despite having ignored her for years. Most tellingly, Veronica reached out multiple times about potential collaborations, each pitch more desperate than the last. She offered to feature Maya's jewelry in sponsored content, to interview her for her podcast, to include her pieces in gift guides for her followers. What she didn't seem to understand was that Maya's brand had already moved beyond needing that kind of support. The Vogue article published 2 months later with the headline, "The Jewelry Designer Who Built an Empire from Rejection." It featured beautiful photos of Maya's pieces alongside quotes from industry insiders praising her business acumen and design vision. The article mentioned her college friends only briefly, noting that, quote, "Even those closest to her in college are surprised by the scope of her success." The piece generated enormous interest in Maya's brand from exactly the kind of customers she wanted to attract: women who valued quality over trends, who were building their own wealth, who saw luxury purchases as investments in themselves rather than attempts to impress others. Sales doubled within a week of the article's publication. Maya's website crashed twice from traffic, and she had to hire 3 additional staff members to handle the influx of orders. More importantly, she began receiving inquiries from potential investors who were interested in helping her scale the company even faster. Maya found herself in the unusual position of being courted by the same type of people who had once ignored her. Venture capital firms that focused on luxury brands wanted meetings. Fashion industry veterans offered to consult on expansion strategies. Celebrities, stylists reached out about red carpet collaborations. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when Maya received a message from the organizer of her college reunion, which was scheduled for that fall. The message was effusive in its praise for Maya's success, and included a not-so-subtle request for her to sponsor part of the event, in exchange for recognition as a distinguished alumna. Maya stared at the message for a long time, remembering how invisible she had felt during her college years, how certain she had been that she would never be the kind of success story the school would want to celebrate. Now they wanted to claim her achievements as evidence of the value of their education, despite the fact that everything she had built came from lessons learned after graduation. She crafted a polite decline, explaining that her travel schedule wouldn't permit attendance but wishing everyone well. Maya had no interest in being paraded around as proof of the school's excellence for people who had never bothered to support her when she actually needed it. Instead, she used that weekend to open her flagship store in Soho, a beautiful space that showcased her jewelry like fine art, while telling the story of her journey, from struggling artist to luxury brand founder. The opening drew fashion editors, industry insiders, and customers who had been following her brand since the early days. Maya stood in her own store, surrounded by her own creations, hosting an event for people who genuinely appreciated what she had built. The contrast with her college reunion couldn't have been starker. Instead of seeking validation from people who represented her past, she was celebrating with people who were part of her future. The financial transformation was staggering. In the 2 years since Veronica's cruel message, Maya had gone from making less than $30,000 annually to running a company with 7-figure revenue. Her personal net worth had grown from negative to substantial, and she owned real estate, investment accounts, and equity in a rapidly growing business. But the psychological transformation was even more profound. Maya no longer measured her worth against other people's achievements or sought validation from those who had written her off. She had proven to herself that she could build something valuable from nothing, that her ideas and efforts could create real wealth and meaningful impact. The documentary about her company aired the following spring to widespread critical acclaim. The episode featuring Maya's story was titled Foundation, named after the necklace that had started her transformation. It showed her working in her original Queens apartment, interviewed customers who had become part of her community, and captured the opening of her Soho store. The most powerful moment in the documentary came when Maya was asked about the message that had catalyzed her journey. She showed the camera Veronica's original Instagram message, reading the words "mid" and "embarrassing" aloud. "I keep this screenshot as a reminder," Maya told the interviewer. "Not because I'm angry, but because it represents the moment I stopped seeking other people's approval and started building something that mattered to me." Sometimes the most painful feedback is the most valuable, because it forces you to confront truths you've been avoiding. The documentary's success led to speaking engagements at business schools and entrepreneurship conferences. Maya found herself sharing her story with audiences of aspiring entrepreneurs, many of whom were struggling with the same feelings of inadequacy and exclusion that had once consumed her. Her message was always the same. Success wasn't about proving wrong the people who had dismissed you, though that was a pleasant side effect. Success was about building something valuable for people who needed what you could create, about turning your unique perspective and experiences into competitive advantages rather than sources of shame. Maya's company continued to grow, expanding into new product lines and international markets. She opened stores in Los Angeles and Chicago, launched an online education platform teaching jewelry design and business skills, and began investing in other women-founded luxury brands. 5 years after Veronica's message, Maya received an invitation that made her laugh out loud. It was for Veronica's wedding, an elaborate destination affair in Tuscany that was clearly designed to be as Instagram-worthy as possible. The invitation included a note: "Maya, I know things were complicated between us for a while, but you're such an inspiration to all of us. I'd love for you to be there as I start this new chapter." Maya RSVP'd with a polite decline and a beautiful wedding gift from her collection, along with a handwritten note wishing Veronica genuine happiness. She bore no ill will toward any of her former friends, but she also had no interest in being props in their continued performance of perfect lives. Instead, Maya spent that weekend at her cabin in the Adirondacks, a property she had purchased the previous year as a retreat from the demands of running a rapidly growing company. She sat on the deck overlooking the lake, sketching designs for her next collection and planning the expansion of her business into home, goods, and accessories. Her phone buzzed with notifications from social media, but Maya ignored them. She had learned that the most important conversations happened away from public platforms, in the quiet moments when you could hear your own thoughts clearly enough to distinguish between what you actually wanted and what you thought you should want. Maya Chen had built an empire from nothing, turning quote and embarrassing into millions of dollars, and a brand that represented everything she valued: authenticity, quality, and the belief that beautiful things could emerge from difficult circumstances. But the real victory wasn't the money or the recognition or even the satisfaction of proving her critics wrong. The real victory was that Maya had become exactly who she was meant to be: someone who created value instead of seeking it from others, who built wealth instead of performing it, who had learned that the best revenge wasn't getting even with people who had dismissed her. The best revenge was becoming so successful that their opinions stopped mattering entirely. She closed her sketchbook and walked down to the lake, where the water reflected the setting sun in patterns that reminded her of the geometric designs that had made her famous. Maya smiled. thinking about the girl who had once cried over cruel messages and desperate for inclusion in spaces where she didn't belong. That girl would be amazed to see where refusing to stay small had led. But she probably wouldn't be surprised. Deep down, Maya had always known she was capable of extraordinary things. It had just taken the right combination of anger, determination, and strategic thinking to turn that potential into reality. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, and Maya headed back to her cabin to plan the next phase of her empire. After all, she was just getting started. Maya's empire didn't stop at jewelry. 3 years after the Bergdorf breakthrough, she was sitting in the corner office of a Manhattan high-rise that housed the headquarters of Chen Collective, the luxury lifestyle company she had built around the philosophy that elegance should be earned, not inherited. The view from her windows showed Central Park stretching toward the horizon, a vista that reminded her daily of how far she had traveled from that cramped Queens apartment. The company now employed 47 people across design, production, marketing, and retail operations. Maya had expanded beyond jewelry into handbags, home goods, and what she called investment accessories pieces, designed to last decades rather than seasons. Each product line maintained the same aesthetic philosophy, bold architectural designs that suggested strength and ambition rather than delicate femininity. Her latest venture was the most ambitious yet, Chen Academy, an online platform that taught women how to build luxury brands from scratch. The curriculum covered everything from product design and manufacturing to brand positioning and scaling strategies. Maya had developed the program after receiving hundreds of messages from women who wanted to follow her path but didn't know where to start. The academy wasn't just about business education, it was about mindset transformation. Maya had learned that the biggest barriers to success weren't external obstacles, but internal limitations. Women who had been conditioned to accept less, to apologize for their ambitions, to seek permission instead of taking action. The academy challenged students to think bigger, to price their work appropriately, to position themselves as industry leaders rather than grateful participants. The first cohort of students had just graduated, and their results were remarkable. Sarah, a former teacher from Ohio, had launched a luxury candle line that was now carried in boutique hotels across the Midwest. Priya, an engineer from California, had developed a line of architectural planters that were featured in Architectural Digest. Lisa, a mother of 3 from Texas, had created a collection of statement earrings that celebrities were wearing on red carpets. Maya smiled as she read through their success stories, remembering her own journey from obscurity to influence. Each of these women had started with talent and determination, but needed someone to show them how to package and position their gifts for maximum impact. They had learned not just how to make beautiful things, but how to build businesses that commanded respect and generated real wealth. The academy's success had attracted attention from major media outlets and business publications. Forbes had featured Maya on their self-made women list, noting that she had built a multi-million-dollar company without taking outside investment or compromising her vision. Harvard Business School had reached out about developing a case study on her scaling strategies. But perhaps the most satisfying recognition had come from an unexpected source. Northwestern University, her alma mater, had invited her to deliver the commencement address to the graduating class. The same institution that had never shown interest in her success while she was struggling now wanted to claim her achievements as evidence of their educational excellence. Maya had accepted the invitation, but not for the reasons the university expected. She planned to use the platform to challenge the graduates' assumptions about success, to encourage them to define achievement on their own terms, rather than accepting the narrow definitions society provided. She was working on her speech when her assistant knocked on her office door. "Maya, you have a visitor. Veronica Sterling is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." Maya looked up from her laptop, surprised. She hadn't spoken to Veronica since the brief encounter at her Bergdorf trunk show 3 years earlier. According to social media, Veronica's influencer career had plateaued. Her follower count had stagnated, brand partnerships had become less lucrative, and newer influencers with fresh content and younger audiences were capturing the attention she had once commanded. "Send her in," Maya said, curious about what had brought her former friend to her office. Veronica entered looking polished but tired. wearing a designer outfit that Maya recognized from a collaboration post from several months earlier. Her smile was the same bright, practiced expression she used in sponsored content, but her eyes held a desperation that no amount of professional photography could hide. "Maya, thank you so much for seeing me," Veronica said, settling into the chair across from Maya's desk. "Your office is incredible. This whole building is amazing. I can't believe you built all of this." Maya gestured toward the window overlooking Central Park. "It's been quite a journey. What brings you here today?" Veronica's composure faltered slightly. "I wanted to talk to you about a potential collaboration. I've been following your academy, and I think there could be some really interesting synergies between what you're teaching and my audience." Maya studied her former friend's face, reading the subtext beneath the polished pitch. Veronica's influencer empire was crumbling, and she was looking for ways to reinvent herself before her relevance disappeared entirely. Partnering with Maya's successful business would give her credibility with a more affluent, achievement-oriented audience. "Tell me more about what you have in mind," Maya said, genuinely curious about Veronica's perspective on her own situation. "Well, I have 1 million followers across platforms, and a lot of them are interested in entrepreneurship and building their own businesses. I was thinking I could promote your academy to my audience, maybe interview some of your successful students, create content around the transformation stories. In exchange, you could offer my followers a discount on the program, and I could take a commission on any enrollments." Maya nodded thoughtfully. The proposal wasn't inherently bad, but it revealed how little Veronica understood about Maya's business model or target customer. The academy wasn't looking for students who wanted quick fixes or surface-level inspiration. It was designed for women who were serious about building substantial businesses and were willing to invest significant time and money in their education. "That's an interesting idea," Maya said diplomatically. "Can you tell me more about your audience demographics? What percentage are actively building businesses versus aspiring to start something someday?" Veronica shifted uncomfortably. "Well, it's hard to get exact numbers, but I know there's a lot of interest in entrepreneurship content. My posts about side hustles and passive income always get good engagement." Maya recognized the evasion. Veronica's audience was primarily composed of young women who enjoyed aspirational content but weren't necessarily prepared to invest thousands of dollars in business education. They followed her for lifestyle inspiration and affordable product recommendations, not serious professional development. "I appreciate you thinking of me," Maya said carefully, "but I think our audiences might not be perfectly aligned. The academy students are typically women who are already generating revenue from their businesses and are ready to scale to 6 or 7 figures. They're less interested in inspiration and more focused on specific strategies for premium positioning and sustainable growth." Veronica's face fell slightly, but she pressed on. "I could definitely adjust my content strategy to attract more serious entrepreneurs. Maybe we could do a trial partnership to see how it goes." Maya felt a familiar pang of recognition. Veronica was experiencing the same desperation Maya had felt years earlier, when she was willing to compromise her vision and dilute her message in hopes of gaining approval and opportunity. But there was a crucial difference. Maya had been building something valuable that the market simply hadn't discovered yet. Veronica was trying to reinvent herself to remain relevant in a market that was moving beyond her. "Veronica, can I ask you something?" Maya said gently. "What do you actually want to build? Not what you think will be successful or what your audience expects, but what genuinely excites you." The question seemed to catch Veronica off guard. She sat quietly for a moment, her practiced smile fading as she considered her answer. "I don't know anymore," she admitted finally. "I started the influencer thing because it seemed fun and easy. Post pretty pictures, get free stuff, make money from home. But it's gotten so competitive, and the algorithm changes constantly, and I feel like I'm always performing for people who don't really know me." Maya leaned forward, recognizing the exhaustion in Veronica's voice. "What did you want to do before social media became your career?" "I studied sociology because I was interested in how communities form and how social movements spread," Veronica said, her voice becoming more animated. "I wrote my senior thesis on how fashion trends reflect economic anxiety in different demographics. I thought I might go to graduate school or work for a research organization. That sounds fascinating, Maya said, and she meant it. What happened to that interest? Life, I guess. Social media started paying better than research assistant positions, and it seemed more glamorous. But I miss the analytical work, the feeling of discovering something meaningful rather than just creating content to feed the machine. Maya saw an opportunity, but not the one Veronica had originally proposed. Have you ever considered pivoting your platform towards social analysis? Using your research background to create content about consumer behavior, cultural trends, the psychology behind social media itself? Veronica's eyes lit up for the first time since entering the office. I've thought about it, but I wasn't sure if my audience would be interested in that kind of content. Maybe your current audience isn't your target audience, Maya suggested. Maybe you need to build a new following around your actual expertise and interests, even if it means starting smaller. It was the same advice Maya would have given to any academy student who was trying to force their business into a mold that didn't fit their authentic strengths. Success came from aligning your work with your genuine capabilities and passions, not from chasing whatever seemed most immediately profitable. But what about my follower count? My brand partnerships? I spent years building this platform. Maya understood the fear behind those questions. Veronica was afraid to give up the external markers of success she'd accumulated, even though they were no longer serving her long-term goals. It was the same fear that had kept Maya trapped in survival mode for years, accepting small opportunities because she was afraid to bet on bigger possibilities. What if your follower count drops but your engagement and monetization improve? Maya asked. What if you have fewer brand partnerships but they're with companies whose values align with yours? What if you build a smaller but more dedicated community around work that actually fulfills you? Veronica was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of Maya's questions. Finally, she spoke. I came here hoping you'd help me save what I've built, but you're suggesting I should abandon it and start over. I'm suggesting you should use what you've learned to build something better, Maya corrected. You have valuable skills in content creation, audience development, and brand partnerships. But you also have expertise in sociology and research that could differentiate you in a crowded market. The question is whether you're willing to use all of your advantages instead of just the ones that feel safe. Maya stood and walked to her bookshelf, pulling out a copy of a business book that had influenced her own transformation. She handed it to Veronica along with her business card. This book helped me understand the difference between building a business around your existing circumstances versus building one around your ultimate vision, Maya said. If you decide you want to make a real change, not just optimize what you're already doing, I'd be happy to talk again. But I won't be able to help you prop up a platform that doesn't align with who you're becoming. Veronica accepted the book and card, her expression thoughtful rather than disappointed. Thank you for being honest with me. I think I've been avoiding making hard decisions because I was afraid of losing what I've already built. The hardest lesson I learned was that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything you have in order to gain everything you want, Maya said. But the risk is usually smaller than it seems, especially when you're building from a foundation of real expertise, rather than just following trends. After Veronica left, Maya returned to working on her commencement speech. The encounter had reminded her of the importance of authentic transformation versus surface-level reinvention. Too many people were willing to change their strategies without examining whether their fundamental goals were worth pursuing. The speech she was crafting challenged the graduates to think beyond conventional definitions of career success. Maya planned to share her own story, but not as a blueprint for others to follow. Instead, she wanted to illustrate the importance of building from your authentic strengths, rather than trying to fit into existing models of achievement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, her former college friend who had married into wealth and built her identity around domestic perfection. The message was uncharacteristically direct. Maya, I saw that Veronica visited your office today. I know this is random, but could we talk? I'm going through some things and could use advice from someone who's built something real. Maya stared at the message, wondering what crisis had prompted Jessica to reach out after years of silence. According to social media, Jessica's marriage appeared perfect, her lifestyle enviable, her children beautiful and well-behaved. But Maya had learned that social media rarely told complete stories. She responded with an invitation for Jessica to visit her office the following week. Maya was curious about what had changed in her former friend's life, but more importantly, she was beginning to see a pattern. The women who had once dismissed her were now seeking her guidance, recognizing that her success was built on more substantial foundations than their own achievements. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. 5 years earlier, she would have been grateful for any acknowledgement from these women. Now they were coming to her as supplicants, hoping to learn the secrets of building something lasting in a world that seemed increasingly unstable and superficial. Maya's assistant knocked on her door again, interrupting her thoughts. "Your 3 p.m. is here. The documentary crew from Bloomberg wants to get some footage of you working and ask a few follow-up questions." The documentary was part of a series about entrepreneurs who had built successful companies during economic uncertainty. Maya's story was particularly relevant because she had started with no capital, no connections, and no safety net. Her success proved that resourcefulness and strategic thinking could overcome almost any disadvantage. As the camera crew set up their equipment, Maya reflected on how surreal her life had become. 5 years ago, she had been invisible, overlooked, dismissed as mid and embarrassing by people whose approval she desperately craved. Now, major media outlets sought her perspective on business strategy, universities invited her to speak to their graduates, and former friends visited her office seeking advice. But the most satisfying transformation wasn't external. Maya had learned to trust her own judgment, to value her unique perspective, to build from her authentic strengths rather than trying to conform to other people's expectations. She had discovered that the most powerful revenge against those who had dismissed her wasn't proving them wrong, but building something so substantial that their opinions became irrelevant. The Bloomberg interviewer asked her about the moment she knew her business would succeed. Maya thought carefully before answering. "I think there were 2 turning points," she said. "The first was when I stopped trying to fit into existing categories and started creating my own. The second was when I realized that the people whose approval I had been seeking weren't actually living the kind of life I wanted to build." "Can you elaborate on that second point?" the interviewer asked. "I spent years feeling envious of friends who seemed more successful than me, but I eventually realized that their success was largely performative. They had built impressive personal brands, but they hadn't built wealth or independence or the kind of work that would sustain them long term. Once I understood that difference, I stopped measuring myself against their achievements and started focusing on creating real value." The interview continued for another hour, covering topics ranging from scaling strategies to the psychology of luxury branding. Maya found herself enjoying the conversation, appreciating the opportunity to articulate lessons she had learned through years of trial and error. As the crew packed up their equipment, Maya's assistant handed her a stack of messages from potential investors, collaboration partners, and speaking opportunities. Each represented possibilities that would have seemed impossibly ambitious just a few years earlier. Maya smiled as she reviewed the opportunities, thinking about the girl who had once cried over cruel text messages and desperately sought inclusion in groups where she didn't belong. That girl would be amazed by the life Maya had built, but she probably wouldn't be entirely surprised. Deep down, Maya had always known she was capable of extraordinary things. It had just taken the right combination of rejection, determination, and strategic thinking to transform that potential into reality. The sun was setting behind the Manhattan skyline, casting long shadows across her office. Maya gathered her things and prepared to leave for the day, but first she opened her laptop and began typing an email to Veronica. "Thank you for visiting today. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I wanted to share a resource that might be helpful as you consider your next steps. I'm attaching information about a research fellowship program that focuses on digital sociology and consumer behavior. The application deadline is next month, and I think your background would make you a strong candidate. Sometimes the best way forward requires going back to what originally excited you about your field. Best, Maya." She hit send and closed her laptop. Maya had learned that true success wasn't just about building wealth or achieving recognition for yourself. It was about creating value that lifted others, about using your platform to expand opportunities rather than hoarding them. As she walked toward the elevator, Maya caught her reflection in the glass wall of her office. She looked confident, purposeful, completely at home in the world she had created. But more importantly, she looked like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was building toward. Maya Chen had turned mid and embarrassing into a multi-million-dollar empire, but her greatest achievement was simpler and more profound. She had learned to see her own worth clearly, independent of other people's opinions or approval. Everything else had flowed from that fundamental transformation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.